Okie dokie. I think we are now broadcasting. We'll let folks kind of trickle in here while Trish works on her background. So we'll let folks trickle in here, and then Trish and I'll get started in a second here. So Trish, what were you saying?
Oh God, that was 30 seconds ago. You know I have a short memory.
I think it was something about your awesome speed round of golf this morning that you had to like run through in order to get back to the house for this.
I got a 6 on a par 3, and I'm blaming you.
Okay.
I was like, "What time is it?"
I'll take the blame.
Yeah.
I'll take the blame there.
I think I even 3-putt. My God.
No, goodness.
Yep.
Yeah. So as folks are trickling in here, hey there, folks. Go ahead and drop your questions in the chat room here. For Trish and me, and then we'll grab people out of there as we go.
I love that. I love that you grab people out and don't just read their questions. So it's really
very nice to see. Yeah, it's very nice to see people's face. So what were you saying about this, like the sequence writing stuff?
Yeah. So what we've done, and actually, I think maybe one of my clients might be on this.
Oh, delightful.
Is said people are struggling with messaging and process now because it's so hard to get at your buyers, right?
Yeah.
So what they're struggling with is being succinct and being interesting and being human and being relevant. So we have this just process where we get immersed in your business, figure out what mediums we should be using, LinkedIn, social, whatever the cases may be. And then we write you something that you can put into Outreach, SalesLoft, whatever your sales engagement platform is, and we train your people on it. So it's a way to say, you're struggling, your team is struggling, they're getting depressed. Right. Let's, instead of them trying to figure out a million things, let's give them something that's best practice, get them successful, and then replicate from there.
Got it. And how long does it take from kind of like soup to nuts to implement that?
4 weeks.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Like it.
Yeah, me too. And it's super fun for us.
Yeah, it is kind of fun to come up the learning curve on somebody's business.
Well,
it allows you to like learn anything.
And it's always interesting to deconstruct messaging that was, most sales messaging is meant to be read. Like we grabbed it from marketing or we did something. So It's super fun to deconstruct messaging that was meant to be read and make it human and relevant.
Right.
So yeah, we're passionate about it.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll get started as more folks trickle in here. But really quickly, welcome to Sales Strategy Office Hours here. So this is a modern sales event. And kind of the background on Sales Strategy Office Hours was I'm Pete Kazanji. I'm one of the founders of Modern Sales. I ended up doing this a lot with, asking people or answering people's questions, digging into their issues on a one-off basis. Hey, can I pick your brain on XYZ? Hey, can we get time to talk about blah, 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 blah? And so one of the things that I kind of thought about was like, well, what if we just potentially could do this publicly and do it with somebody who's also quite expert at, at sales operations, sales strategy, et cetera. And kind of that's where Sales Strategy Office Hours came from. So if folks have watched or like listened to Car Talk or Loveline or what have you, this is kind of the equivalent to that, but for sales nerdery. So that's kind of where this came from. We tackle about 5 to 8 questions during the hour here to kind of keep it moving along. It's a ton of fun. And one of the nicest things about it is that we get to have wonderful guests like Trish here, who I'll let introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Trish Bertuzzi. I'm CEO of the Bridge Group. I am also author of the Sales Development Playbook. What we do is provide consulting and implementation services to B2B tech companies, sales development, inside sales, account management, virtual selling. We can either build you the team or take what you have and make it better.
Love it. We probably have sent out 100 copies of the Sales Development Playbook.
I appreciate that because, dude, you are funding my retirement with that effort. So I really appreciate it.
I don't know about that because I would imagine the margin's not super high, but
$4.
yeah.
$4.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So like 100. Oh yeah. It's like $400. Yeah. That's like,
Hey,
that's like two boozy lunches with Trish and in Florida. Wonderful. And obviously Trish is a huge modern sales contributor, as is her son Matt. Matt has written what's it called? Lightning Sales Ops, another really
it's a
fantastic book
really
on.
interesting book. I got it
You
right
got him
here.
right there. Oh, there it is. Yeah, it's a really fantastic book on
For
sales
geek.
operate sale. Yeah, it's super geeky. Sales
Mhm.
operations and CRM architecture for specifically for SDR
Yeah.
organizations.
Yeah, sales development team. If you're using Salesforce and then the Lightning experience and you have an SDR team, the book is a must read. Give
Yeah,
him
it's
his $4 too.
yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. Wonderful. Well, we're so glad to have you to kind of geek out, Trish. I think that'll be a bunch of great stuff for us to cover. Um, for folks who don't know, I'm Pete Kazanji. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. We make sales performance analysis software that does the analysis for you. Continuously monitors KPIs for AEs, SDRs, CSM, AM teams, and kind of reports that information out to managers and operations and so on and so forth, just to make everybody amazing at management by metric. I also happen to have started and run Modern Sales, the nation's largest sales operations leadership and enablement peer education community. It's about now I think it's like 20,000 members at this point.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
it's a great place for sales geeks, which is like why we're able to find so many of them. And I wrote a book on sales, on startup sales, called Founding Sales, because my background is actually not in sales; it's in product management and product marketing. And when I started my last software company, Talent, then I kind of had to get my act together with respect to sales, and kind of made a bunch of mistakes along the way, and then wrote down the solutions to that, at least for very, very, very early stage selling. So that's a little bit on me. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to get into this here. I think we had a really phenomenal question from Kate here. So Kate, I'm going to go ahead and grab you here and promote you to a panelist, because I think this is absolutely fantastic, and I imagine that that Trish has to contend with this question fairly frequently. So Kate, let me go ahead and unmute you here. You there, Kate?
Yes, I am. Hello.
Hey,
Trish.
Nice to see you.
See you as well too.
Thank you.
goodness.
So
It seems like so Kate, can you go ahead and introduce yourself and what your org does, and kind of like what you guys sell around, like sales motion, kind of just context for everybody else here, and then we can get into your question.
sure. So I'm the director of sales development at cybersecurity in Boston called Rapid7,
Oh
and
yeah,
phenomenal company. Yeah, I've
yeah,
been since December, and it's been a great move. So
wonderful.
So coming in, being under a year in this organization, I for one fully believe that, ABS, we always need to be selling, but I also believe as a leader of a sales development organization in the amazing work that this team does. This team is a lifeblood of any organization with regards
Mhm.
to the pipeline that they develop. And also many times they become the next wave of exceptional AEs,
Totally.
closers. So my question to you is, I'm always looking for strategies and ways to ABS, to always be selling, but to always be selling the value of the sales development organization
Mm.
to executive leadership.
Mhm.
So,
Trish.
yeah. So I love the fact, Kate, that you're being proactive with it, and thinking ahead of demands for ROI, because the ROI thing makes me absolutely crazy. But
Mhm.
let me talk about the culture of that question to begin with. All right, because I'm just going to go on like a little rant, okay?
Little rant. Trish,
Little
you
rant.
never go on rants.
No, never. Every day of my life. So everyone's always looking to ROI or sell to the executive team the value of the sales development team.
Mhm.
And I'd like to give some pushback on that, because the sales development team does their job if they get your selling team in front of the right guy at the right company, right? They did their job. So why don't we look at the ROI of each and every one of our AEs individually to look at their ability to launch the sales process off that introductory call and convert it to pipeline? And I'm going to tell you, if you have 30 AEs, you're going to have 10 different percentage rates. So I guess when people talk to me about, you know, how do I sell the value of my SDR team? Well, the value is in there. They are putting your sellers in front of the right person at the right company. What more do you want them to do? They can't make the market want you. They can't make people have budget. They can't make COVID go away. They can't change the fact that, you know, every buying decision has become a committee decision. They can only do that one thing and do it well. The rest is just math from there, but it's math that should be calculated against other parts of the organization. There's my rant.
That wasn't a rant. That was good. Well,
Okay.
Unsurprisingly. Yeah, for sure. And I think what I'd like to, so I'm gonna channel Matt Bertuzzi, and my answer is gonna be math. The answer to everything is obviously math. I mean, Trish is a good like argument and kind of sale internally, like, okay, well, this is what we're supposed to do. Like, you know, what else do we want? And then I think I'm going to make the left brain argument, which is, all right, well, like, let's make sure, are we capturing the sufficient information in order to allow us to prove this ROI? And so as Trish was ranting, I was noting down a couple of different things here. So I think a lot of times what ends up happening is organizations will do a mediocre job of actually attributing the value to SDRs, and so I think a couple of things that you need to make sure that you're doing in order to validate that you can actually report on these sort of things is, do you have SDR op association? Because a lot of organizations will do sometimes they'll do some sort of like weird rules of engagement where, like, oh yeah, you know, the SDRs pass a lead and then the AE flips it, and then, like, you know, and then we flip it again, and then, like, you know, we flip it, and you just got to make sure that there's an SDR. Like, usually the right way of doing it is a lookup field on the op that is a user lookup field that ties to an SDR name, because then that way we can report on those things, because then once we do that, then this is something we see with like our clients at Atrium as well, because once you have that in place, you can do all sorts of magical things. You can look at how many ops are being created. You can look at, oh, but wait, if you look at the total amount of the amount of those ops and sum that up, oh, well, now we actually have pipe that we can actually look at. Oh, but you know what we can also do is we can do win rate off of those ops that the SDRs are creating. And we can see that Joey over here, he creates a lot of ops, but none of them close. And we can determine, so then what we can decide is we can say, oh, is that because Joey is tied with like Frank, and Frank is a crappy AE, and he fumbles all these deals, or are those actually round robin to 10 AEs? And it just turns out that Joey's ops that he creates, the SDR, are crapola, right? So I think the first thing you can do is, like, if you get that data structure right, then you can start asking a bunch of different questions. Not only is that really useful for managing the SDR, it's like, hey, Joey, stop putting crap on the calendar. By the way, you can't blame it on the AE because it gets round robin to these 10 AEs and nobody closes anything that you create. So like you can do it from a management standpoint, but then you can also do it from an organizational standpoint and say, hello, CRO, or hello, marketing. Look at all this pipe that was generated. By the way, look at the bookings that came out. So that's the first thing. Of course, a more rudimentary way of doing that is just making sure that your op sources are not, your lead source op sources are well attributed there as well. That can be a little bit challenging. So those are just that's like one thing that I would recommend to make sure that you're doing. Then the other thing too is that look at it from like, the reason why SDR is so awesome is because it's an assembly line, right? It's a, what you're doing is you're taking a not lower value, but like maybe lower complexity job to be done by a rep, and putting it onto a less expensive resource is usually more junior. And that's fantastic, because now what we can do is we can have a $60,000 or $70,000 resource, a $30 an hour, $35 an hour resource doing things that otherwise that AE would have to do. So that's actually really impactful, because now that AE can be spending his or her time doing like way more impactful things. But we have to make sure that's actually happening, right? Oh, I have my SDRs doing stuff so I could go golfing with Trish.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that what I do with my SDR? No, what you do is what I would expect is that all that prospecting block that comes off of your calendar should now turn into incremental customer facing meetings, right? Or like the number of ops that you can carry is higher, right? The number of meetings that you're having is higher. You better be on top of your pipeline. I better not see any untouched opportunities, because your SDR is the one doing it, doing all. And so I think quantifying that is actually really, because if you said, oh, well, if the SDR organization disappears, guess what has to happen? Well, it has to be backfilled in some sort of capacity. And like, guess what? Like your AEs, if they're having 10 customer facing meetings a week or 15 customer facing meetings a week right now, if all of a sudden the SDR organization disappears, well, my hypothesis is that that's probably going to go down by like 30%, because they're going to have to backfill. So those are a couple of different things that you can kind of like, those are some left brain things that you can do there. Trish, did you want to add anything before we move on?
Yeah, I just want to say, I think the worst thing you could do is look at SDRs in a silo. When you're looking at their value, you've got to look at the whole food chain. What's happening with what they're giving to the AEs, and you need to look at it under a microscope, not just in aggregate, but individually. Because I will tell you, in our clients, we find the biggest place pipeline leakage happens is at the discovery call. Right guy, right company, discovery call happens. AE probably has never been trained on how to launch the sales process. We're good with qualified leads, but not so good with launching the sales process. Leakage. AE doesn't get blamed, SDR gets blamed. So you kind of got to look at the big picture.
Yeah, and not to belabor this, and we do have to move on, or else I'll get yelled at in the NPS scores after the fact. But Trish brings up such a good point, which is, I think that one of the things I really don't like at all is when AEs are responsible for flipping ops, and like it becomes the AE's judgment. I hate that. And because like the SDR is responsible for bringing to bear something that like meets externally verifiable criteria. In my opinion, I feel that that's the best way of going about it. Like, so Atrium is a good example of this. Like the number of SDRs plus AEs plus CSMs in an organization indicates to Atrium how juicy of an op it is. If there is at least a sales operations person in seat, that's kind of like minimum qualification criteria. And so like those things are externally validatable in LinkedIn or like on a website or whatever. And so like if there's enough of that, right? If we meet that, then it's the AE's role to like make something happen, right? As opposed to like, well, so like it's their responsibility to launch the process, given the fact that those minimum criteria is met. So as long as that can also be another thing to do, is to make sure that those minimum criteria are characterized. Cool.
Kate, we went at you, baby. Did you get any nuggets out of that?
I got a lot of nuggets. And what I'm synthesizing it all to be is make sure to tell the story of the organization, yes. the value that they're bringing, the examples. And, I will say at Rapid7, there's huge support for this organization. I guess I'm just so passionate about the organization. I look for development opportunities for SDRs to get in front and present at executive meetings and that kind of thing. And so I think it is a balance between left brain and right brain techniques and tactics. So thank you. Very helpful.
You bet.
Our pleasure.
Bye, Kate. Thank you very much.
Welcome to Car Talk. Thank you for coming.
That's right. What noise is your CRM making right now? So actually, Robert Chain had a really fantastic question that he brought up ahead of time. So I think he is here. There he is. We're going to go ahead and promote Robert to a panelist here. All right, we have some great new questions showing up here in the chat as well. Robert, you there?
Yes, I am. How are y'all doing?
Hey, oh my goodness. He's got a super fancy mic. He's a pro.
Well,
Robert, thank you for joining us. Can you introduce yourself, the organization that you work with, and then we can get into your question.
Yeah, hi everyone. I am Robert Chain. The reason for the fancy mic is I'm the founder and host of RC Squared, which is an experiential marketing podcast and community. My question was actually on an idea that Trish, I know you spoke on a couple weeks ago about SDR personas and this idea of a Baton Passer SDR versus a more strategic SDR, where Baton Passer is great for transactional and strategic can provide a bit more discovery and more personalized oversight through the sale. I would like to expand on that idea and kind of ask, depending upon how your team leans on this spectrum, how does it drive the decision to either call high or low within your target organization? And then how does the different personas maybe drive what type of KPIs you would be tracking their performance on?
Ooh, okay, great
Love
question.
it.
Yeah. So what Robert is referring to was a dialogue we had, and I don't even remember where we had it, Robert, LinkedIn webinar, I don't remember where, but about the sort of two flavors of SDRs. One we were calling the Baton Passer, those people that set introductory meetings, and the other they were calling strategic SDRs, people who actually did maybe an initial discovery call. So it is really a critical decision in any organization to decide which of those you're going to use, or are you going to use both? Because I think one big area of failure for a lot of companies is they take one model for their sales development team and they put all eggs one basket. Might not work. So maybe in the mid-market you have baton passers, and then maybe in the enterprise, you have the strategic SDRs. It really depends on where you want your revenue to come from, what you're trying to accomplish, the skill sets that you're hiring for, the ability of your management team to manage multiple KPIs, multiple training and coaching requirements, the whole ball of wax. So I think people really have to think through that decision. And yes, you're right. It does impact KPIs. Now, second part of your question, call high. Depends. What's high? So CEO of an SMB company? Sure, call high. You know, C-suite in a mid-market company kind of depends on what you call mid-market. CEO of Boeing, although you might get him right now. He's probably not too busy, but you know, another issue. So I think you really have to kind of think through those things. I am not usually a fan of having SDRs call into the C-suite for mid-market and above, only because I just don't want to see the misstep. What I would rather see in those organizations as a use of these strategic SDRs is call in the mid-level, gather information, talk to people, look at current state, openness to change, level of satisfaction, gather all this great information, go back to the AE, and then have them use that information to personalize their outreach to the C-suite. That's typically my preference. Right. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah. We had Jamie Cronick, who leads SDR at Iterable, on Sales Strategy Office Hours. It's either 2 or 3 weeks ago, and she had really great kind of commentary on this as well. So I think the important thing to think about is like what does your sales motion necessitate, which I think is what Trish was kind of saying earlier about like where do you want your revenue to come from. Like you may have a situation where if you're a transactional organization, say you're selling to SMB or you're selling, or you're selling to unsophisticated mom and pops, like maybe you're a 5 stars or maybe you're Shopify Pro or something like that. It's kind of there's a single contact in a given account. You're going to be targeting them. It's just kind of like it's like all activity based. And so I think that like applying an account-based sales development protocol to that approach is probably like more calories than it's worth. And kind of similarly, if you're selling, like actually maybe Kate would be a good example of this. I know Rapid7 sells security stuff, which is usually fairly high ASP depending on the offering. Well, engaging in a transactional behavior when targeting something like that, an organization that is more used to a more bespoke selling behavior can actually be terrible, because you can, torch your entire market. We actually see this a lot where in some organizations that we work with, where you give SDRs like a seat of outreach or a seat of sales loft and not any guidance, and like, oh boy, look out, right?
Yeah,
They're gonna go ham. And so I think it's important to kind of think about, okay, what is the required sales motion there, and then the protocol kind of cascades from that, and then the KPIs by which you measure what's actually happening, right? The quantity KPIs and quality KPIs kind of cascade from that as well. So like Jamie was, so Iterable is really cool. They make modern email engagement or messaging engagement, customer engagement software, kind of like their next generation responses or exact target or what have you. So there's something that can, like, a mid-market organization can use them. Some really big B2C organizations can use them, like an ESPN or something like that. So they actually have a variety of different segments. And so the more transactional SDRs, they're very activity based and they're measured as such. Like, obviously there's like quality instrumentation there as well in terms of like engagement rate or email engagement rate, or like conversion rate of accounts engaged versus opportunities created. But then for the more sophisticated SDR motions, the enterprise folks, like, not only do they partner more closely with the AEs and they kind of divide and conquer, they're also KPI differently. Like, they're supposed to be multi-threading in accounts. They look at things like the number of contacts they're engaging per account. They look at the number of their top tier accounts that have been apportioned to them. So like, here are your Glengarry leads. Here's your 100. Don't mess them up. I'll take them back, right? And they KPI them to make sure that they're actually engaging with those folks and multi-threading with them and touching them frequently, as opposed to just like, going crazy on kind of like aimless activity. So I think that those are kind of ways that you can approach that. Anything else you wanted to add, Robert, before we move on?
No, that was great. Thanks a lot for the insight.
Yeah, you bet. Well, good to see you, and have a great weekend. All right. I think Jonathan, sales strategy office hours stalwart, Mr. Soroka here, had a really fantastic question that we can get into here. Hey, there's Jonathan. Hey, there he is.
Hi, Jonathan.
Hello. Uh-oh, he's frozen.
He's muted.
He's frozen in an amazing pose, no less. There he is.
He's muted. He's coming. Here he is.
There he is. Hey, buddy. We wanted to talk about outsourcing, Mr. Jonathan.
Okay, Jonathan.
I think we're having audio problems here, man. So we're gonna have to come back to you.
We'll be back.
We'll be back. All right, I'm gonna grab Lish here. I thought Lish had a really great question, so let me go ahead and grab.
Ooh, I love that question.
Hey, there's Lish.
Hello. I'm trying to figure
Hi,
out.
Lish.
Hi, Lish. Hello.
My question is, if the win rate of SD sourced opportunities is super low and the volume is where it should be, how would you approach solving the issue?
Yeah, and Lish, can you introduce yourself and the company that you work at, just for context?
Sure.
Answer.
So I work at Algolia, and I run revenue enablement.
Delightful. And Algolia sells to developers and kind of like IT, doing search as a service. Is that right?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Wonderful.
Let me make sure I get that.
What do you think, Trish?
So your SDRs are doing what they're supposed to do. They're making their numbers. The volume is there. Right guy, right company. And by the way, when I use the term guy, I'm not.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotta kill it. All right. So, but your win rate is low.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you have an AE problem. So I'm going to go back to that whole thing about, I don't know what your sales process is, but if discovery call is part of your sales process, maybe they're stumbling and trying to figure out how to launch the sales process. Maybe they're going right into demo. Maybe they don't do any requirements definition or any discovery, but the analysis I would do would be conversion rate by AE.
Right. So I'm going to throw a curveball. The conversion rate on AE is, for any AE sourced pipeline, is super high.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
This is fairly typical.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things, that oftentimes where you kind of see issues of like SDR AE alignment, which is kind of what this is.
Yeah.
It turns out if an AE self-sources something,
Mm-hmm.
they're probably going to work it.
Right.
And so I think there's a couple of different ways to approach this. One is, are those ops do they meet minimum criteria, as Trish noted? So I think the important thing here is, like, do you guys have very crisp rules of engagement that say this meets this criteria? And I would imagine in Algolia's case, it would probably be like, maybe web traffic or something like that, in order to, like, this organization has a search requirement, they have web traffic, et cetera, it's legit.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that being crisp around that, and then potentially modeling that in the opportunity, such that it's like indisputable when an SDR creates it, there it is, right? It's kind of indisputable. It's right there. It's like, it's in the new op creation notes. It's potentially modeled, et cetera. We can't dispute it. So then the second thing would be is exactly what Trish is talking about, which is, well, let's look at conversion rate on AE basis. Okay. How many reps do you guys have at Algolia?
Around 40.
Okay. Does everybody have low win rates on SDR source?
Yeah.
Got it. So that would be the first thing to indicate, because like if you have it, because sometimes what we end up seeing, so like when we implement somebody in Atrium, like during their pilot process, this is one of the benefits of being very quick to turn on. You can answer questions very quickly, like, oh, let's look at win rate by AE, and then split by the, and then filter down to an op source. Sometimes what you'll end up seeing is like, oh, actually there's a number of AEs who are having a lot of success right here. So if you have an existence proof that it can be done, then we can kind of figure out what it is that they're doing that's different. Sounds like that's maybe not the case here, and it might be more uniform across the entire AE team. So then I think that.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
What would the AE say if you said we're going to take away the SDRs? You're not converting what they're giving you, so it's just become an expense. So you're not going to have SDR support anymore.
They probably freak out. But I mean, they're already doing a lot of outbound, right? Because they don't trust the source that they're getting from the BDRs, I think. So I think there's like a lot of like broken relationship there that I'm trying to resolve. So they're already doing a ton more outbounding than they should do.
Well, I guess there's an interesting question there, which is, are the targets different? So, because I think if you're saying that they're doing outbounding and the SDRs are doing outbounding, then what's the difference, right? Like there seems like there's something different. Like, are they selecting different accounts? Are they selecting different contacts? Is there some sort of like compelling event that the AEs are probably indexing off of? If you have 40 AEs, unless there's usually some sort of like scalable, compelling event identification and then execution is usually not. It doesn't usually like organically manifest in like a 40-person sales organization, right? So my presumption is that you probably don't have a bunch of people doing like, crazy Bombora stuff or whatever. So my thought here is that to figure out like, what is the difference if they're both outbound, what's the difference? And if there's not a difference and it's the same accounts and it's the same contact criteria, then that would indicate to me that like the ops that the SDRs are creating are probably the same as the ones the AEs are creating. Now, maybe it's not the same. Maybe the AEs know a lot better what a legit op looks like. And so what we can do is we can say, okay, well, what is that actual criteria, and then enforce that with the SDRs. So because essentially what it sounds like you have going on here is like there's an A/B test happening, which if the inputs are the same and the outputs are different, it seems that either if the inputs are actually the same, then that smells like an AE execution issue. but given the fact that you have 40 AEs, which is like a pretty legit sample size, and like the win rates across all those folks for outbound for SDR source stuff is not very high. It seems like maybe there's an account and contact selection behavior that's potentially different that then could be converged on, which would be great, because then if we can figure that out and then systematize it for the SDRs, then hey, right, now we have SDRs creating opportunities that are as legit as AE source ones.
Yeah. I mean, Pete's 100% correct. That is the analysis that needs to happen. Are we looking at apples to apples? I mean, that's the first analysis that needs to happen. I will give you, just as a data point, what one of my clients did that was in a similar situation. And they did do the apples to apples analysis first to make sure that they were targeting the same verticals, same size companies, same buyer persona, you name it. What they did was give the AEs the opportunity to say, no, I don't want SDR support, right? Of course, no one said that. Everybody wanted their SDR support. So they said, here's what's going to happen. Unless your conversion rate from SDR meetings, it reaches this percentage month over month over month, you don't make that percentage, you lose SDR support.
Right.
So instead of giving it to the entire organization, they gave it to the people that were actually maximizing it. And what they found that it absolutely upticked their conversion rates for SDR opportunities because they just started paying more attention to it. It was the carrot and the stick.
Yeah.
Super
The one last thing, I mean, we're kind of being highfalutin here. So oftentimes the answer, I'm a big fan of Occam's razor. Usually like the simplest explanation is the right one. I would look at whether or not the SDR ops are being worked. Right. And like,
yeah, can you even see? Yeah.
Yeah, this is a very, very frequently what ends up happening is like, we do this with like Atrium people all the time, is like, we go and look at, AE touch frequency on like split by op source, and like sure enough, like the SDR sourced ops aren't being worked. And so I get that part of that is like, well, historically this op source has been crap. Why should I be working on it, et cetera? But I think there needs to be some sort of like minimum SLA there as well. And then I think the last thing that that Trish noted was that like, it sounds like maybe in addition to doing an investigative process on is account selection and contact selection different for the AE targeted versus SDR targeted, I think also like listening to a bunch of those disco calls on for the SDR source ops to see if the AE's not like just like showing up and kind of like mailing it in. Oh man, it's one of those SDR ops, like F this, right? I'm gonna like goof off on Slack while I'm while I'm reading the disco questions or whatever. Because I think you can get like you can get a negative like feedback loop there. And so like what you want to make sure is just like audit that. Cool. Wonderful to see you, Lish. I think the last time I saw Lish was at the Data Grail holiday party right before the world went crazy. So it's absolutely delightful to see you, and I hope you have a good weekend. Say hi to Daniel.
Will do.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Yeah, that's a spicy meatball to contend with. That sort of
No, I think your advice was phenomenal. You do have to, first of all, make sure it's a level playing field with apples to apples, ops, same company, same buyer persona, absolutely there. And then if it is, then you start to address a behavior problem.
Yeah, for sure. You see this a lot too. You just get these situations where like kind of things spin out of control, and like people are like, oh yeah, like the leads are weak. And it's like, well, you're actually not working them. It's like, well, we're not working them because the leads are weak. And it's like, really? What if all of a sudden I started putting really rad leads in there? You'd still not be working. You wouldn't know. Oh, right. Anyway, Jonathan, you working now?
Can you hear me? Testing.
We can. Yeah, somewhat, but it sounds like your bandwidth is a little light. So maybe we can introduce yourself extremely briefly, and then we can get into your question, which I think is a pretty good one here.
Yeah, Jonathan up here in Mass, doing advisory work with early stage SaaS startups. Actually started consulting with a BPO for lead generation and sales outreach. So this is a little personal in nature, the question, but we outsource potentially everything in the process, and was just curious, not to put Trish out of work, but where would you suggest, or where have you seen, or would you never recommend, outsourcing the lead gen part of the sales process.
All right. So I
And no is
absolutely,
good. I'd
no,
like
I
to hear why.
absolutely do recommend it. I have a whole service wrapped around helping my clients pick the right vendor and then managing them through a successful implementation. Yeah. So I am a big fan of it. I mean, if you don't have the bandwidth or the expertise in-house to build this team, I think outsourcing is a thing of beauty. A great way to learn if you want to test messaging on a new product, if you want to ramp up a new rep's territory. There are so many good reasons to outsource that I'm a huge fan of it. You just have to do it well.
Right.
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 What are the hallmarks of doing it well? Because I mean,
Yeah.
a huge thing that happens on MSP is you get these, you get people like asking every like two months or so, like, hey, outsource SDR. Hey, outsource SDR. What's up with the outsource SDR? And then everyone like becomes the religious war. Oh, it doesn't work. Oh, da, 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 da. What is the key of doing it right?
Okay, so here's the deal. An outsourced SDR team cannot make the market want you. I hate to break your heart and tell you this, but if you were a company right now selling vitamins instead of aspirins, or selling something that nobody wanted before and they certainly don't want now, outsourcing is not your magic bullet. I was the VP of sales and an equity partner in an outsourcing company in a previous life. So I completely understand the pain of that one. It actually was the impetus for me to start the Bridge Group. But you have to give an outsourcing agency something that's been tested and is repeatable and scalable. If you don't have those things in play, then set your expectations where they should be, which is low. And think of it more as a pilot or as a learning experience and not just a pipeline filling experience. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think you see kind of like two different versions of outsourcing. I mean, you were talking about outsourcing kind of parts of the sales organization, and I think there's like the stratification of the different parts of the sales organization, and then there's also potentially the stage. So one of the things that I talk about very frequently, and like founding sales is kind of pretty much about this, is how you really can't delegate. It's very difficult to delegate to somebody else the development of a sales motion. And that's kind of what Trish is talking about. Like the development of something has to be done in-house, usually because you're very expert at it. Like it's difficult for other people to have the same level of like market expertise and kind of like market context and problem context that you have. And then once packaged up, that can be potentially scaled across other folks. That said, there are vendors that can help you with the development of that, which essentially is what Trish is talking about. Is like sometimes a bridge group will do a consulting engagement where it's like, great, we're going to help you crystallize your messaging here. You have not baked it. So that's actually outsourcing a very different thing than the outsourcing. So I think an important thing to think about is what stage you're at and what needs to be developed. So then there's another component where if you stratify the sales process, and we were kind of talking about this with respect to with Kate from Rapid7, there's like account and contact identification.
Mm-hmm.
There's engagement, sales engagement, so prospecting. So people say prospecting, it's actually a bundle of work. Right? Oh, you got a prospect. What do you actually mean by that? Right? Account and contact identification, contact information, acquisition. Then there's actual engagement. Then there's discovery, and then there's deal running, right? And then there's closing, and then there's successing, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's usually the things that can be more successfully with less risk outsourced will be things that are more fungible. So there's an organization, my buddy Eric Martin runs sales in a sales organization called Vanta. They make super nifty SOC 2 compliance software. They actually have a really badass outbound motion where they have a handful of offshore resources in India or Bangladesh or the Philippines, I forget exactly where it is, doing the account and contact identification and contact information kind of like aggregation. And that's it's like, I think it's like 8 people right? So like that's outsourced, if you will, but it's kind of like lower risk, and the behaviors are like more constrained. So I think the more constrained the behaviors are, and the more that like the lower the risk is, that's where you can kind of be more successful in outsourcing things. I've seen a bunch of like I get inbound from like every person kind of coming up with a new sales technology or sales offering, and I'm starting to see like sales rep as a service right now.
Mhm.
Oh my God,
And like that just seems extraordinarily difficult to me. So like that's the opposite of like a lead development rep, is essentially someone who's like, you know, following your decision tree and your sales motion, and like has all your talk tracks nailed and what have you. Like that just sounds like crazy pants. But Trish, you wanted to say something?
Well, I mean, I'm partnering with someone who offers, they call it SaaS, sales as a service, but their background is in hiring. So they're experts on hiring the perfect people for their clients. And now what they're doing is saying, we're going to hire them. And they were doing the onboarding and the training after the hiring. So now they've just taken it to the next step, packaged this up as a service. So it's their headcount, not yours. They run it. And then if you want to hire the people, you can just move them right in house.
So I can see that. I can see that working. That's it. But like, that's not. Yeah, you're not like splitting a resource. It's like, in the morning I sell, you know, local. I sell like, you know, media to local business, and in the afternoon I sell security to CISOs. Like that seems absolutely insane.
Right.
But in this case, it's like a captured, like you are. It's almost like hosting. Right back in the day with servers, like this is your server over here, we feed and water it, and if you want to take it over. Interesting.
So the first $1 million deal I ever closed was for sales as a service at Telesales Inc. We went to BBM Planet and we said, we're going to build your entire team, we're going to get up running productive, we're going to run it for a year or two, and then you can bring all these people in-house. And they did. So the idea, the concept has been around for a long time. It's just the execution that is the rub.
Any follow-up there, Jonathan, or we good?
Well, that's why Trish is successful. She executes well, and it's a rare art, and very appreciate the answer, guys. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jonathan.
Great to see you, Jonathan. Have a great weekend. Wonderful. Trish, I know that you had a topic or a question that you wanted to talk about, which was the kind of the return to the sales floor, right?
So it's a topic everyone's thinking about, right? When can my sales organization, or when can my company go back to the office? And everyone expected that by now we'd already be back to the office, but that's not happening. Some companies are putting it off till 2021, you name it. So we did some research, which is available on our site, on our blog, that where we surveyed, because we're talking to executives every day, right? That's what I do all day long. I talk to CROs, CMOs, CEOs, and I know what their opinion is, but we wanted to hear what salespeople thought about going back into the office, because it's a complex issue.
Sure.
So we did this research, and it is very interesting. We couldn't ask people's age, so we did it by number of years in sales. The interesting thing we found was the less number of years you were in sales, the more you wanted to get back to the office. Shocking. The longer you've been in sales, the less you wanted to get back to the office, right? And most people, what they want is not to get back to the office specifically, but to have flexibility. That flexibility opens up a whole nother can of worms. So the younger you are, let me say it a different way. The earlier you are in your sales career, the more the impetus to get back to the office, probably because your social life is there, and probably because you're sick of working at home with your 3 roommates, right?
Yep.
The longer you've been in sales, the less you need to go back. You're more comfortable probably in your role. You might have childcare issue, who knows what the case may be. But one of the things we started talking to our clients about, and we're trying to help people figure this out, is how do you go back to the office?
Yeah.
You have to think about things like public transportation. You have to think about things like elevators, microwaves, refrigerators, your physical environment that your people are going to be in. So one idea we had that we've been talking to people about is designating teams, like a red, because people want flexibility. They don't want to be there all the time. So you're either on the red team, the white team, or the blue team.
Sure.
And you can't go into the office unless it's red team day.
Yeah.
Reason behind that, limited exposure, contact tracing, the whole ball of wax. You know, I think when you really start to think through how do we bring our people back into the office, it gets more and more complex as you start thinking about all the nuances.
Yeah. I think, by the way, I don't have a very large sales organization. I have 4 AEs. I'm hiring another 4 right now. And I have a couple SDRs, but totally aligns to what you're talking. And like, you know, I'm a sales leader I play a sales leader on TV. I'm really just like a founder who like washes toilets and makes sandwiches for people and what have you. But I think there's been big upside to working from home. But you have to think about the office as a bundle of like features, right? I think Trish super nailed it, which was, you know, for an SDR, you're 24 years old, or junior AE, you're 28 years old, or what have you. It's a huge component of your social life. And I actually got roasted by my reps on this, because we have a feedback culture. So they you know, they're welcome to roast me. And I was kind of, you know, screwing it up because you know, you have this organic kind of camaraderie and context creation that happens, like post call, high five, right? You know, just walking around the floor, things like that. You see people in the kitchen. And so those things are now gone. And so if you don't replace them, you can replace them, but you have to be intentional. It can't be just like organic. So some of the things we've been doing there have been like, we do Zoom happy hours on a Thursday evening every week. But it's different if you're like, all right, it's happy hour time, folks, at the office, and like everyone starts walking out the door and like everyone gets dragged along, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas if it's just like on the calendar, you can choose to show up and don't show up. Well, what ends up happening is you get this like degradation curve, and like pretty soon people are like, well, I'm not going to go to that because no one else is going to go to that. So we realized we had to have like good forcing functions for that. So now we do different teams host it. They're responsible for bringing a game, things like that. So I think that, you know, replacing what's absent in the office. But some things are actually kind of difficult. The other component of what the office provides is like real estate, like a desk. Like I'm sitting at my wife's former desk, my desk now, and but like I'm lucky enough to have this, right? You have, as Trish was noting, we see this on our onboarding calls for Atrium. You see these. You're onboarding like 15 SDRs, and they're all kind of like sitting there hunched over a MacBook Air screen or whatever. And like we talk about this, like they've got their like Dropkick Murphys poster on the wall, or like what, and you're like, oh my goodness, this is not like a conducive work environment for that person. And moreover, they don't have the real estate resources to give themselves a workstation. So either one of our SDRs is moving to San Diego, and because like when she made her original real estate decision, it wasn't like I'm going to be working out of this place, right? I'm going to be living most of the time, because she lives in San Francisco. I'm going to be living most of the time out of the house, right? And so that's cool. And then, but then some people may not want to move, right? And like refactor their real estate situation. So you got to provide some sort of like workstation for them. Like I'm a big fan of tooling. Like humans are expensive, and opportunity cost is expensive. Tooling is not expensive. Like a monitor that costs $250 is like fly shit as compared to, you know, missed opportunities that an SDR is not creating. Okay, well, they don't have a place to like put up their workstation with their external monitor. Like, and so I think that you got to figure out, like, can they have a workstation, or do you have to provide like a pod area for them in your office in order to support that? And then what are the hygiene implications associated with this?
There's so much to think through, and it's such an individualized choice, because it's not just them going to the office, it's then them going back, like, are they going to see their grandparents? Are their parents high risk? You know, like there's so many things to think through in this craziness, that we've just got to be as flexible as possible, be as logical as possible, not rush through decisions, not get pressured to make decisions. There's a lot to learn here.
Yeah. One thing I will note though is that the distributed work environment has been extraordinarily impactful for my team from a level of effort, and like essentially you get 2 hours of selling time back a day or more.
Yeah. Oh God.
Right?
Oh God. Yeah.
It's absolutely fantastic. And when we see it in our KPIs like crazy, you can actually see like the COVID spike in terms of like meetings per AE per month. Like it turns out if you have a meeting, like you're able to stretch your calendar because, well, most of us are based on the West Coast. If you've got, you know, a Boston client or a New York client or whatever, you can make the intentional choice to like schedule that at 7 a.m. or schedule that at 8 a.m. And because you know that you're just like rolling out of bed and throwing on your, you know, your salesperson shirt and doing your call versus having to get in the office in order to have that. So that's actually kind of awesome. And as long as your organization is well instrumented, I dropped a deck that I put together on like instrumenting work from home sales teams. As long as you're well instrumented, it actually can be extraordinarily powerful there. Now, the flip side of that is you have to be careful about burnout, right? Because it turns out that, you know, 5 calls a day, like 5 demos a day is exhausting. Right. And so what you can end up with is a situation where reps can end up like a kid in a candy store and be like, all right, I'm going to like load up my calendar so I can like crush it and get into accelerators and what have you. You got to keep your eye on their untouched opportunities and their pipe engagement, because they might put too much on their plate and then not work it well, and also burn themselves out. Like one of my reps, I'd actually seen that his activity was dropping over time. He's an extremely gregarious, like extroverted guy, and you could totally see his activity falling out of band compared to himself historically. And so we got into it and chatted about it. And he's like, yeah, it's very difficult for me to get re-energized sufficiently on the weekend to jam during the week. And so we started adding some more features to that, to the organization in order to like help him get that back up again. But then we just said like, all right, well, let's just cap your meeting volumes.
There you go.
Let's just, because like the worst possible thing I could have is for you to like, I have a huge investment in you in terms of like, you know, subject matter expertise, sales motion understanding, your existing pipeline, like, you know, your leadership in the organization as a moral leader and an expert. Like the worst thing possible would be for you to burn out and like check out and then take off. So those are things to just kind of be aware of there. So actually that was my alarm firing off there. Trish, we are done. Oh, see, goes really fast, right?
It does. It does.
Yeah. So everybody, thank you very much for joining us. This recording is going to be up on YouTube. I'll drop it out to everybody else along with all the various resources. I know Trish talked about the Bridge Group blog. She and Matt and other folks put really fantastic resources out there. Trish, was there anything you wanted to leave us with before we adjourn?
You know, there were a couple of questions that we didn't get to. So if people want to just reach out via LinkedIn or whatever, I am always happy to brainstorm with people.
Yes, and you get very high quality brain to storm with.
Thank
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Trish. This was absolutely fantastic. And now I assume you're going to go have your second round of golf for the day?
I am not.
Oh, you're not. Okay, fantastic. Well, say hi to Matt for me and have a great weekend, okay?
You too. Thanks.
Okay.